Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Ramilaji.
Om Parthaaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamrita Varshanim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Amba Tvam Anusandhadhami Bhagavad Gite Bhavadveshanim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Fullaravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajwalito Jnanmayaha Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraika Panaye Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gita Mrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dokta Gopala Nandana Partho Vatsaha Sudhir Bhokta Duktam Gita Mritam Mehet Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansa Chanura Mardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Bhishma Drona Tata Jayat Ratha Jala Gandharani Lotpala Shalya Grahavati Krupena Vahani Karanena Velakula Ashwathama Vikarna Gora Makara Duryodhana Vartani Sottirna Khalu Pandavairananadi Kaivartakaha Keshavaha Parasharyavachah Sarojamamalam Gitartha Gandhotkatam Nanakyanaka Kesaram Harikatha Sambodhana Bodhitam Loke Sajjana Shatpaday Rah Pepiyamanam Mudha Bhuyada Bharata Pankajam Kalimala Pradvamsinah Shreyase Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langyate Girim Yat Kripatam Ham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutah Stunvanti Divyahastavahe Vedeh Sangha Padakramupanishadair Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavasthit Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyantam Na Viduh Sura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha.
Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Raghuji, will you recite verses 1 to 6? Unmute yourself, please.
इति अक्षरब्रह्मयोगो नाम अष्टमोऽध्यायः अर्जुन उवाच किं तद्ब्रह्म किमध्यात्मं किमकर्म पुरुषोत्तम अधिभूतं च किं प्रोक्तम् अधिदैवं किमुच्यते
Yeah, carry on. 1 and 2.
Yeah. अधियज्ञः कथं कोत्र देहेऽस्मिन् मधुसूदन प्रयाणकाले च कथं येयोऽसि नियतात्मभिः.
So Arjuna sets the context of this chapter very beautifully. by asking very, very relevant questions. He's no longer asking questions about saying what will happen when I win, what will happen when I lose, how will I survive the death of my relatives, and so on and so forth. Now he's asking questions about Adhibhutam, Adhidaivam, and so on and so forth. Now, when we understand the word Bhutam at the microcosmic level, when you add the word Adhi, which means superior, therefore, then you are looking at the macrocosmic. And we understand that chapter 7 to 12, we are talking about the cosmos. We are no longer talking about the microcosm. So he sets the context very beautifully. We also see the evolution of Arjuna. Arjuna has evolved. He is no longer thinking about the smaller self. He started looking at investigating into the larger cosmos. So here, verse number 3.
Shri Bhagavanuvāca Aksharam Brahma Paramam Svabhavodhyatma Muchyate Bhuta Bhavodbhava Karo Visarga Karma Sanjitaha.
So here he says that Brahman is that which is indestructible, that which does not change, that which is immutable. And it is the supreme. And he says that our own swabhava is the adhyatma, our inner self. What is our true nature? Our true nature is Sat Chit Ananda. That is the adhyatma. So at the microcosmic level, we call it the Atman. At the macrocosmic level, we call it Brahman. So here he says, your inner self is the adhyatma. Bhuta bhavod bhavakaro. So those which are bhuta here means that which is in the material world. Those that are causing the actions pertaining to the living in this material world, those including visarga, or which means creation. So creation, development, destruction, all the things that are continuously happening, those are called karma. Karma at the cosmic level. In the individual, at the microcosmic level, we talked of karma as actions that we do propelled by our vasanas. At the macrocosmic level, he's saying anything that is happening, that which is being created, that which is being sustained, that which is being destroyed, that which is being obscured, that which is being granted freedom, all of these. We see that in the Bhakti Yoga traditions, we see that Ishvara has 5 actions. We call them Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, Tirodhana, and Anugraha. These 5 actions, what he is indicating here at the cosmic level, are all called karma. Verse 4.
Adhibhutam charo bhava purushachadi daivatam adhiyagyohame vatra dehe deha bhritamvara.
So here he says kshara. Kshara means akshara. He started the word with verse 3 with akshara. Akshara means that which is immutable. So when he says kshara, is what which is destructible, which keeps on changing. So adhibhutam, all the 5 elements that we are looking outside, not only the 5 elements, the mind, the manas, the buddhi, the ego, all of these are going through changes. So he says they are kshara. And the purusha, when you identify, when you look at internally the adhidaivam, deva, we have understood as that which is illuminated, right? That which shines. What is that which shines? Sense objects shine because of the senses. So that which controls the sense objects. What is that which controls the sense objects? Manas. What controls the manas? Buddhi. What controls the buddhi? That. Right? We have seen that in Bhagavad Geeta in chapter 2, he has declared that, right? So he says very clearly that which is controlling that, all this illumination that is going on, that which is the controller of all these karma that is happening, is the Adhidaivam. And what is Adhiyagya? Adhiyagya, typically it would mean Lord of all Yagyas. Lord of all Yagyas, which means that all of this, that which is indicating towards what? Towards that which is the substratum, that is what is inside your body also. Dehe deha vritam vara. That means that which is internally. Vara means best. He is talking to Arjuna, addressing him as the best. Here he is saying he's the best because he has asked a very important question. Otherwise, he calls him Partha and all such names. So Partha word comes from Prithvi and also comes from Pritha. So that which is base. So when Arjun goes down and he becomes very entangled, he is called Partha. Whenever he is entangled with his family, then he is called Pandava. Whenever he is entangled with emotions, he is called Kaunteya. Whenever he is asking questions or is being propelled to do things which are greater than what he himself is at this point of time, then he is called Mahabahu, he is called Dhananjaya, he is called Vara. So Krishna is addressing him from whenever we see these addresses, you will be able to understand how is Krishna viewing this particular aspect of the behavior of Arjuna. So yadi agyo me vatra dehe deha britambaraha. So in the deha, that which is in the deha. Verse 5.
Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayah.
So he says, Antakale cha mameva. Those who remember me, smaran means to remember. Those who remember me at the time of death, they come to me. And there is no doubt about this. Now, we have discussed this last time, that we can only remember something sometimes when. So what is memory a function of? What is memory a function of?
यदि हम हर समय इसको याद करते हैं तो लास्ट में भी आएगा ही आएगा.
Memory is a function of habit. Okay.
Yeah.
What is
habit? Practice.
Practice, habit. Memory is a function of attachment.
Okay, it's the ego plays the role in memory completely.
Very simple. I'll give you an example. In my corporate world, what happened? I had my managing director at that point of time, gentleman, very, very erudite person. He came into my classroom. So I naturally wanted to. I'm a very lazy person. So what I did is I told him that, look, now he's in the classroom. Why should I go and give lectures? So I told him, please come up and tell us. So there were questions about how the insurance industry is functioning and so on and so forth. Now he started writing on the board. He had horrible handwriting. That's a separate issue. Now he started writing from 1992. The AUM in the market capitalization was so much, the GDP was so much, the growth rate was so much, the rate of inflation was so much. And he traced out from 92 to 2008 in line by line, every 4 years, 5 years, he was giving us figures. And he had no piece of paper also that he was looking at. And I asked him, how do you remember so much data? And he just smiled and he left it. Then about almost 6-7 months later, we were to go for a meeting with the government. Now, I was the person who was interacting with that governmental body, and he was going for the first time. So he told me that, listen, I don't know anybody there, so you have to introduce me to each person and tell me a little bit about that person beforehand so that I have a context with which I can talk to him. So every time there was one person, I would give him the entire backdrop of this particular story, the entire context, right? Kahan rehta hai, kya karta hai, kyon idhar hai, etc., etc. After he finished the entire visit, we were flying back and he said, how do you remember all the names? So it isn't that I have a special memory. It's just the fact that I am attached to those numbers. And you are attached to the personality of that person. And therefore you remember people and you remember how they look like and what they are and what their background is. You don't remember numbers because that doesn't appeal to you. So what interests us, what attaches to us is what we remember. Right? I can be very gender specific here and say that that is why women remember more things because they have more attachments. So I will refrain. That comment is withdrawn. I refrain from putting that comment onto the record because I have definitely challenges with that in all spheres of my life. So, but jokes apart, we remember that which we are attached to. Then, how will you remember Brahman at the time of your death? Only if you have developed attachment to it. Simple. It's a very simple equation. So what he's saying is Antakale means that at the time of death. Now, very interestingly, Gurudev takes a very interesting take on this. He says Antakala does not necessarily mean the death of the physical body. It also means the death of the ego. So when you are sitting in meditation, from chapter 6, you have learned and you have sat down in meditation, you have got into the contemplation, you have given up karma, you have given up, because karma sannyasa has happened in chapter 5, and then you have managed to sit down. And now when you are sitting down in contemplation, in the seat of meditation, you still have to have an attachment till that point of merger. That's when you let go of the pole. But till that point, which is where the death of the ego happens, your mind is completely focused on that one thought of Brahman, one contemplation of Brahman. So it's not about saying, oh, wait, let us wait till when we are going to die, and that's when we will start remembering. And that's definitely not going to happen. Right? Few things in life that we can give guarantees for. And yes, please.
So in this, while I was contemplating on this, these few verses, I asked this question: why does Sri Krishna bring up this event of death? And I was thinking, actually, the primordial sin is that identification, and that identification happens between the soul and this BMI at the time of conception. And that identification gets broken at that moment of death. So when that identification gets broken at that moment of death, it's a moment of flux. At that time, if we are able to focus on Parabrahman, that's where we are transported immediately. See, it is a very momentous event at that birth and death point.
See, today we were studying Bhavani Ashtakam, and in that, very beautifully, that verse we were studying, we were talking about Vishade, Vivade, Vishade, Pramade, right? Vishade, Vivade. When I'm fighting with somebody, when I'm dejected and depressed, when I'm in intoxication, do I still remember the Brahman? When you're fighting with somebody, do you keep saying, oh, Jaya Jaya He Mahishasura Mardini Ramamardini Shaila Sudhe? You are that time full. You are Mahishasura Mardini. Your 10 hands have come out with all the astras and you are going out for that fight. Vivade, Vishade, when you are dejected, that time you don't remember her. You remember all the bad things that have happened to her and you ascribe all of them to her. So, it is not only, so you're right when you're saying that it's a very large inflection point, but we have so many small inflection points right through our whole life. And in each of these inflection points, do I let my emotions run me or am I in control? I, which is not the body, which is not the mind, which is not the intellect. Am I in control? Does this mean, oh, I have to become emotionless? No, the emotions will happen. Let them happen. I do not identify with them anymore. Right? In chapter 7, we saw, I am in them, they are not in me. And the moment you withdraw and you say, I am not, they are not in me, you have removed the energy from the bulb. You have switched it off. It cannot glow anymore. Now you choose when you want to put it on. So is anger bad? Oh, no. Anger is a very important emotion. It's a very powerful emotion. And it can be used. Have I told you the story of the snake and the sadhu?
Yeah.
Right? The story of the snake and the sadhu. The snake, ultimately, what did the sadhu ask the snake? I told you not to get angry. I did not tell you not to show anger. Showing anger is very different from getting angry. I am angry. I am showing anger. See the language. It's that itself very clearly shows that I am, therefore anger has nothing to do with me. It's only an act. I am an actor who is acting out anger. So, and now to end the doubt about this in verse 6.
Yeah. Yam yam vapmi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tamevaiti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha.
What we think about is what we will become. Right? You go to see, I give this very simple physical example. You see people working on a construction site. They lift large amounts of weight. Right? And they do it throughout their day. They eat large amounts of food. and yet none of them have the developed physique of a bodybuilder. The bodybuilder works differently, and his body develops into completely a different sort of a physique. Why? Because he applies his mind to the muscle. Right? We call it mind-muscle connect. When you connect your mind to the muscle, your muscle grows, and it grows in a particular way. For the laborer, the mind is connected to transporting the sand or the bricks to the particular from one point to the other. So therefore, the physical being is not being nourished. The mind. So here he very clearly says that what you think about, yam yam vapi swaran bhava, that which you keep remember. Now, when you give up that body, which means you give up the body identification, not necessarily give up the body as in physical death of the body, but even when you are giving up that identification, at that point of time, if you are identifying with something which is lesser than Brahman, that is what will happen to you. And we saw the example of Rishi Jada Bharat, right? So let us go to verse number 7. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhya cha tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhya cha pitamano buddhir mam evahyasya samshayam pitamano buddhir mam evahyasya samshayam tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yudhya cha pitamano buddhir mam evahyasya samshayam. Tasmat, therefore, sarveshu, in all, kaleshu, times, mam, me, anusmara, remember. Smara means to remember. Anusmara, remember continuously. Yudhya, fight. Cha, and mai, to me. Arpita, surrender. Mana, mind. Buddhi, intellect. Mam, to me. Eva, surely. Eshyasi, you will attain, we will come. Asamshayaha, without a doubt. So here he ignores the body, because he says that the body is now not going to be doing things on its own. It is going to be controlled by the manas and the buddhi. And if your manas and your buddhi have been surrendered to me, which means that whatever I am doing in a spirit of having not doing at all. It is just being done. It is being done, right? Kayena vacha manasendriyairva buddhyatmana va prakrite svabhavat karomi yadyat sakalam parasmai narayanayeti samarpayami. Right? That is what we say at the end of every puja, at the end of every chanting. Kayena vacha manasendriyairva, manasa, indriya, vak, tongue, kayena, with the body, with words, prakrite svabhavat, with my essential nature, whatever I have done, I have surrendered to you. That is the spirit with which we are going to work. See, as I keep saying all the time, that our rituals need to be understood. They need to be done with the spirit of how they have been made. So when we look at this surrender and we do these actions with the spirit of surrender, then you have actually, what have you done? You have removed the kartritva. The ego has got removed from the equation. The moment the ego has got removed from the equation, the buddhi and the manas have also stopped playing any roles. Because who drives the ego and manas and buddhi? Ego. And where do the ego come from? Where does the ego come from? Ego comes from vasanas. So the connection between the vasanas and the indriyas has got completely disrupted at the weakest point, which is the ego. Weakest comes strongest point. But it has become a weak point because you have gone through the process of karma yoga, karma jnana, karma sannyasa, karma sannyasa, dhyana, jnana vijnana yoga. You have gone through this entire process. You have come to a point where you are ready to understand what is Akshara Brahman. So he says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu ma manusmara yudhyacha. And he very, very clearly declares that you have to go and act. You cannot sit down in only contemplation. You will have certain duties. Whatever be your duties as a function in terms of your societal role that you play. You are inside the society. You have not run away from the society and you're not sitting inside a forest and living a life of contemplation. Even there you have certain actions to do. So here very clearly he indicates that we need to be in action, but each of these actions that is being done, it is happening. The action is happening. मैं कर नहीं रहा हूं. Kartrutva has got removed. Verse number 8. अभ्यास योग युक्तेन अभ्यास युक्त योगेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना चेतसा नान्यगामिना अभ्यास योग युक्तेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन् परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन् अभ्यास योग युक्तेन चेतसा नान्यगामिना परमं पुरुषं दिव्यं याति पार्थानुचिन्तयन् अभ्यास योग yuktena. Yukta being joined constantly. Abhyasa yoga, by practice of this particular yoga. So he very clearly says that it's not going to happen just because you keep declaring I am Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi is not a mantra for repetition. Aham Brahmasmi is a Mahavakya for contemplation. It is for Atma Vichara. So, Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena Chetasa, by the mind, na Anyagamina. Na Anyagamina means without deviating. Without deviating. You sit in contemplation and, अच्छा bell बजा कौन आया रे? जरा देख तो. सुन मैं 45 minutes के बाद ना मेरे लिए कॉफी बना के लाना. And this is the normal meditation that I see. I'm not criticizing anybody, but that's how our minds behave, right? So Abhyasa Yoga, unless we regularly practice the Dhyana Yoga of chapter 6 that he has declared, unless we sit in contemplation, which is why I come back all the time to the 45 minutes, isn't it? I don't lose an opportunity to talk about it. We have to practice. We need to get to a point where we can keep our body still. Then only will our minds learn to be under control. Then you start doing Soham, which is what are you doing? You are not doing meditation. Soham is not meditation. Soham is just training your mind, which for 8,40,000 yonis, it has learned to jump around like a kangaroo, flea, or whatever jumps around like a monkey. Achanchala, asthira. Chanchala, asthira. Right? It jumps, and where it sits also, it is moving. So all the time that is moving, what have you done? You are trying to bring it to a point where it is going to sit down in one place and keep thinking of Soham only. Now, you don't like Soham. I'm not talking to people here, but I'm saying in general, if you don't like Soham, no problem. You use anything. Anything that goes in with the in-breath and goes out with the in-breath, and you keep the breath and the process of the mind connected, that will work. Subhashitam says, amantram aksharo nasti. There is no akshara which cannot become a mantra. So, Soham is the easiest because Soham is a Mahavakya. It is also because Soham, so sorry. Soham is supposed to be our natural breath. So, when a child is in the Kriya Yoga tradition of Yogananda Paramahamsa, they call it the Hamsa. And Yogananda being a Bengali, he has called it Hamsa. Right? It comes from the word Hamsa. Hamsa. Now, why did they change it? Because it's a practical thing. What does the newborn baby first do? Breathe out or breathe in? What does the first newborn baby do? Breathe out or breathe in?
Gasps for air.
It first breathes out. That's why it is hit. That is why it is hit on the back, and whatever is there inside, all the liquid and the phlegm and everything, that flies out, and it breathes in. Therefore, hum first, so later. Hamsa, 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 so hum. That's how it works, right? So whether you say so hum, whether you say hamsa, hum is the breath out, so is the breathe in. And by controlling the breath and the mind's jumping around, what you are doing is training the mind to sit in one place. It's only once you have trained it to sit in one place will you then be able to extinguish it. It cannot be extinguished unless if it's keeping on to jump around. Then I go back to the thought parade that Gurudev used to describe. The thought parade, I've talked about it. You are the president, you stand there, then the Gujarat ki jhanki aati hai, garba karte karte. प्रेसिडेंट ऊपर से नीचे उतर के गरबा के साथ खुद भी गरबा करते करते जाता है. अरे पीछे से भांगड़ा आ गया, अरे चलो 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 भांगड़ा 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 भांगड़ा. And then the Manipuri comes and you start doing this. If your mind is going to behave like that, is that the president that you are going to respect? But unfortunately, that is what you are doing. So hence he says, Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina. And where do you put your mind, therefore? You put your mind in the contemplation of Paramam Purusham, Divyam, Yati, one attains. Partha, by doing constant remembrance. Chintayan, remembrance. Anuchintayan, constant remembrance. Constant remembrance. So he says, Paramapurusham Divyam Yati. He reaches that Paramapurusham. He becomes that Paramapurusham. Because when you reach Paramapurusham, Brahmavid Brahmaiva Bhavati. You become that. You transform. So we go to verse 9. 9 and 10, and we will stop at 10 today because from 11 he changes direction a little bit. But 9 and 10 are actually a clear takeoff from Kathopanishad. In Kathopanishad, he talks in Yama talks about what is the Brahman, and he says Anor Aniyanam, Brihat Brihatanam, smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest. And he literally virtually uses the same word. Kavim Puranam Manushasitaram, Kavim Puranam Manushasitaram, Anoraniyan sammanusmaredyah, Anoraniyan sammanusmaredyah, Kavim Puranam Manushasitaram, Anoraniyan sammanusmaredyah, Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam, Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam, Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat, Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat, Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam, Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat, Kavim Puranam Manusasitaram, Anoraniyan sammanusmaredyah, Sarvasya Dhataram Achintya Rupam, Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat. Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat. You can hear this in the Purusha Suktam also. In Purusha Suktam, you get this line again. Anoraniyanam, you get in Kathopanishad. So he is very clearly saying, let me take verse number 9 separately. Poet, Kavi, poet, Rishi, Puranam, ancient. So the ancient Rishis. Now there is another way of also describing. What do poets do? Write poetry. Yes, very good. What do actually poets do? Why is poetry associated with Saraswati and not with Parvati? Saraswati kiski patni hai?
Brahma ki.
Brahma. And what is Brahma's job?
Creation.
What do poets do? Creation. They, out of their imagination, they create. Right? So one of the ways of looking of this is another interpretation of this has been one is to say that the ancient poets have described, but one of the other interpretations says that he is the ancient creator. He is the ancient, he is the first creator. Kaving Puranam. And then he says, Anushasitaram, he is the controller. I'm using the word he just to, it should be it. Anoho. Anoho means the atom. Anu is the atom. Aniyamsam, smaller than. Anusmare, always remembering. Yaha, who. Sarvasya, of everything. Dhrtaram, that which is holding together, holding up, sustaining, holding up. Dharitri, that is the name of the earth that we stand on, is called Dharitri, she who holds up, right? Dhrtaram, achintya, inconceivable, rupam, form, aditya varnam, effulgent like the sun, tamasa, darkness of ignorance, parastat, beyond that darkness of ignorance. Now, this description is very, very, see, if I tell you, think of something that is not describable, right? I want you to contemplate, not meditate, okay? Not do japa. Alupochiki. I want you to contemplate the word alupochiki. What will you get? What will you get? Nothing.
Some chart.
Wherever your vasana will go, that is where you will think of it. Right? Alu pochiki, wo alu ka kuch hoga. Right? It's a word that I just created that word. Right? It has no meaning. Now, if I ask you to contemplate that word, now if I contemplate on that word, I'm not going anywhere because I cannot describe it. I have nothing to put it to. So I need frames of reference against which that which is unimaginable can be imagined. Right? Raghuji comes from a science background. Define a point.
You can
What is the
locate a
point?
point, but you can locate a point, but you can't define it.
Correct. Right? You can, therefore, you say a point is a position in space. A point is a position in space. That means I can only identify a point if I have frames of reference, X, Y, Z, or possibly even a timeline. So you have 4 axes. You put 4 axes, you can have a point. This is now, but still the point is not defined. The point is no longer defined. So simple, even in mathematics, we have done that. We have understood it. So if I ask you to contemplate on a point, how will you contemplate on a point? You will need the frames of reference. And therefore, when I say it is smaller than the smallest, yet it is bigger than the biggest, my mind has got Zen. You know, in Zen Buddhism, the Zen master, he teaches by asking you to contemplate on something which is really impossible. For example, he will ask you to contemplate on the sound of one hand clapping. Now, to get to a point where you can even contemplate on this, your mind has to become completely blank. The whole idea of creating this, so these are called koans, Zen koans. So these Zen koans enable you to get to a point where your mind becomes zonked out. It goes to an impossible, unsolvable problem and therefore stops. Stopping the mind. Now that's the Zen methodology. The Advaita methodology takes you to a point, tries to define the point and says, now I know you cannot define it, so let me give you frames of reference. You know an anu. You have understood an anu. Hence, I am explaining that it is smaller than an anu. The anu is the smallest thing that I know. Yes, this is smaller. And imagine the biggest thing that you can. We are all Kupa Manduk. What is the biggest thing we can imagine? Oh, my well. My well is the biggest thing that I can imagine. Fine. Imagine something bigger. Right? Now, when you imagine some brihatta naam, bigger than that biggest that you can imagine. But it has an achintya rupa. It cannot be defined. I cannot put a form to it. So then what is the frame of reference? The frame of reference is aditya varnam tamasa parastat. The frame of reference is it is jnanam. It is knowledge. It is knowledge. Which is why Taittiriya Upanishad says, Satyam Jnanam Anantam. Satyam, it exists. It is in the form of knowledge. And it is endless. The endlessness, the concept of infinite in our finite brain is very, very difficult to imagine. I can ask you very simple. Imagine the distance between, right, mentally. Now, Pramilaji most probably is the nearest to me right now. I mean, from those whose videos are on. Sunanda is nearer, but then, okay. So, now I ask you to imagine the distance from Powai to here. Powai to my house. And you can't. Even that small distance of about 8 kilometers is not fit, doesn't fit into this brain. Now, if I ask you to imagine the distance from here to Delhi, you've gone. Now, imagine the distance from here to Pluto. Oh, impossible. Imagine the distance from here to Andromeda Galaxy. So, our imaginations are so limited. Which is why I say we are all Kupa Manduk. And hence, he tries to break us out of this small limitation that we sit with in our body, mind, intellect. And he declares that that which you are talking about is Anoraniyanam, smaller than the smallest, bigger than the biggest. And how does it look? I can't describe it. But you know what? Aditya Varnam Tapasa Parastat. It is effulgent. It drives away all ignorance. Ignorance.
Atitishtas Dashangulam.
Yes, Atitishta Dashangulam. It is beyond the universe by 10 fingers. Whose 10 fingers? Whose 10 fingers? Right? 10 fingers. It is beyond the universe by 10 fingers. The whole concept is to get your mind to freeze and get to that point where you realize that your imagination is not going to take you there. Our senses cannot comprehend the incomprehensible. But that is the beauty. It can be experienced. That is the beauty of this. And hence in the next shloka, he very clearly declares, Prayana kale manasaschalena Prayana kale manasaschalena Bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva Bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva Prayana kale manasachalena Bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva Bruvor madhye pranamaveshya samyak Bruvor madhye pranamaveshya samyak Satam param purusham upeiti divyam Satam param purusham upeiti divyam Bruvor madhye pranamaveshya samyak Satam param purusham upeiti divyam Prayana kale manasachalena Bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva Bruvor madhye pranamaveshya samyak Satam param purusham upeiti divyam. So prayana kale, at the time of death. Now we know what we are talking about, as I explained, that prayana kale does not necessarily mean physical death. It means death of the body. It means the death of the ego also. Manasa, mind, achalena. Manasa here indicates both manasa and buddhi. Achalena, steadily. Bhaktya, remembering with devotion. Yuktaha, united. Yoga balena, because of the practice of yoga that you have done. In the earlier shloka he has said abhyasa yoga. So here with the practice that you have done, with the strength that yoga has given you, yoga balena cha and eva, certainly, dhruvoho, between the two eyebrows, madhye, between, here, that the pineal gland. Now if you remember dhyana yoga, he had talked of nasagre, right? He had told us to meditate at the, not the tip of the nose, but at the point where the nose begins, which is the bhru madhyaha. Bhru madhye, pranam means the breath, aveshya, fixing, samyak, completely, saha, he, tam, him, param purusham, the supreme, upayati, attains, divyam. So what is he saying? He says that when you sit here, at the time of death, at the time of meditation, at the time of when you have come to a point where the ego is now going to die, right? And the ego is going to wait for people coming around and say, अरे चार्जन किधर है भाई, राम नाम सत्य है बोलने के लिए. चार्जन नहीं मिलेंगे ईगो को. ईगो को ऐसे ही ऑफ हो जाना पड़ेगा. तो वो ईगो जब ऑफ होने का टाइम आया, that time, how does it happen? He says that the yogi, he puts his attention completely on the center of his of the between the two eyebrows. He restrains his breath, which means it's not that he holds his breath or he removes his breath. He's restraining his breath, meaning his body has also slowed down. His body is fixed. See, if you are moving, your breath is also moving in different paces, right? If you run, your breath will be faster. If you slow down, it will be slower. If your mind is active, your breath will change. If your mind cools down, your breath will change. So here he says, your breath has become still. Your breath has become still. Still meaning your mind has become still, right? And then he says completely. Then the yogi attains. Now, what does he do here? See, we have always said that Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre, right? Sankalpa Vakya, we say this. Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre. Yoga Shastra means it is also the practical means of attaining this. So here where he said, first, let me fix the goal for you. Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat. Achintya Rupa Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastat. That is what your goal is. And where is it? It is everywhere. Anor Aniyanam, it has pervaded into everything. It is so subtle. See, the earth element is the gross element. Water can penetrate into the earth element. Right? We see that, right? मिट्टी में पानी डालेंगे तो पानी मिल जाता है. Air element can penetrate into the water element. We all know that. When we boil water, we see that steam comes out, water evaporates, it forms into the air element. Gaseous. Right? Heat element is in between. And space element is even more subtle. It permeates into all of these four other elements. So we have seen this degree of subtlety. The more subtle it is, the more pervasive it is. This is so pervasive that it has permeated into everything in this universe. Anoraniyanam. It is completely pervasive. This pervasive being that you are looking at, which is no being at all, it is that which is the dhataram. It is the substratum on which this entire thing is happening. Now, if we keep that contemplation in our mind, does this mean that I cannot function in the world? No, you can function better. See, if the actor, right, let us take a famous actor, and he gets into the stage, or he gets onto the movie and he's being shot for a movie, and he has to play the role of a bhikari. Now, does he at any point of time forget that he is Amitabh Bachchan or Shah Rukh Khan? No. And he knows that he is acting. Right? Bhagavan Vedavyasa, Sri Krishna are telling us to behave like that. Know that all of this that you are doing is acting. I sustain that act. Know who I am. So, when Amitabh is acting as the bhikari, acting as the coolie, lifting luggage and doing whatever, or in Kala Patthar he goes and becomes a coal miner, he has never been a coal miner. He is always Amitabh Bachchan, and he remains Amitabh Bachchan right through. And he remembers that. If he forgets that and he becomes a coal miner and he starts behaving like a coal miner once he goes back home, then his wife and his children are going to throw stones at him and beat him up and lock him up or take him to a lunatic asylum. Isn't that insanity that we are talking about? Aren't we also insane? We have become insane because we have got this madness of being identified with that body, mind, and intellect and saying we are this complete lunacy. There is no bigger lunacy than the fact that you think that I am this. I am this body, this mind, this intellect. There is nothing more bigger lunacy. And in that lunacy also, if you can remember that you are not, then you've come out of it. right? What is lunacy? Lunacy, when you go back to, I mean, nowadays using the word lunatic is a bad, it's not politically correct and so on and so forth. But what is lunacy defined as? Lunacy is saying that you have lost your sense of identity. One of the definitions of lunacy, psychotherapists talk about this. They say that you have lost your sense of identity. When you have said you've lost your sense of identity, aren't we all in the same boat? We have all lost our sense of identity. We are all thinking, oh, this is Samir, this is this Samir, this is it. I actually did this practice with somebody a few days back, and I asked them that just close your eyes and think of yourself. Please do it. Just close your eyes and think of yourself. And now tell me what came into your mind. Nothing, right? I mean, either it was a body, because you don't remember your own face. So what did you identify with? What came into your mind as I? There was nothing that came into your mind as I. So that I is what you need to find, because you have lost identity. And hence, in going back to the Bhavani Ashtakam, we say pramade. In our lunacy, we don't remember you. The moment I remember you, I have come out of that lunacy. So here he says that he is the Dhrtaram. And he is therefore, because he is the Dhrtaram, he is the sustainer, he is also the controller. Because if you remove the screen on which the movie is going to happen, the movie can't project. So hence, everything that is happening happens in and of Brahman alone. But to get there, verse 10, he says, sit down, fix your attention. How to sit down? Oh, chapter 6. Right? Where to sit down? Chapter 6. But when I sit down, my mind is jumping. Oh, then go back to chapter 5. Oh, my mind is still saying that, oh, I am sitting down. Oh, then go to chapter 4. Get into the process. See, that's a sequence, right? You start with Karma Yoga. Once you have become a Karma Yogi, then you start giving up the fruits and you start looking at the process. Then you say, neither the fruits nor the process, it's only happening. Then you sit down for contemplation. Only then you understand what is this material knowledge and what is this world and what is the actual Vijnana that I need to understand. And then you come to find, okay, now that I have understood Vijnana, now I say, okay, that knowledge will take me to Aditya Varnam Tamasa Parastha. So sit down and put your attention, still your breath, and focus your attention to that point in our body which allows the mind to become still. And the moment the mind has become still, the vasanas drop and the self shines through. Chapter 8. I mean, I keep saying this is my favorite, that is my favorite, but then actually, I mean, I have few shlokas which are really the ones that, I mean, I get goosebumps whenever I recite them. Chapter 8, verse 9 is one of those. It thrills me whenever I recite that because it's such a beautiful description of what we really are. Chapter 8 is a very thrilling chapter. It's a very, very interesting chapter because chapter 8, from here on, Krishna will move into linking the akshara with something that is practically understandable by us. And then he will move that akshara and try to explain why is he saying even akshara and explain the entire cosmos as to how it functions to us through this chapter 8. So he will get into the concept of what this time is, what is kalpa, how does this creation happen, how does it become destroyed, and how does it rest into Brahman, and how does it come out again, and so on and so forth. So that is this chapter 8. We will pick it up again in our next session. Yes, Ravi.
Sir, I was having a little bit of thinking on I think, was it the last Bhagavad Gita class or was it the Aproksha Anubhuti? I get confused. Where you are talking about the compassion of the realized masters. And Krishna also says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanar bhavati bharata abhyuttana adharmasya. Tadatmanu srijamyam. See, and at that time, Son and I were discussing, and he was saying, okay, you keep quoting a Parabrahman. How do I know there is a Parabrahman, this all-powerful, omniscient, omnipotent, all-pervasive entity? I mean, the supreme power. Where have I even witnessed such huge power being manifested? I mean, nobody that I know has seen any of this. All these stories are tale. And then I was thinking about it for a moment. And, Adi Shankaracharya was, he's a realized master. He never denied it. He proclaimed that he was fully realized master. So he had access to that power, but he never felt the need to demonstrate that power. Okay. So I was thinking a little bit on, see, the Parabrahman who has created this entire universe, who has given the rules of this universe, what would motivate the Parabrahman to want to break the rules of that same universe for one or two other individuals? I mean, he would never do it. It means nothing to him. So it has to be, when you said the Ishvara is the person with the compassion, the Ishvara already has an impact of Maya. So there is an attachment already there. And the Ishvara has recognized that there is this other individual who is a great devotee, who is being persecuted, who needs to be saved, or whatever. That compassion wells forth. But that compassion itself is a reflection of ego, because the attachment of the Ishvara. And to me, the Ishvara is also like any of us, an individual who has approached and who is almost in conjunction, or who has become, or we're all, again, there is still one veil remaining that has not been removed. So he has that attachment. And so he feels the need to, because he is so close to Parabrahman, he has access to that immense power. He feels the need to utilize that power to assist or help, yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata.
So yeah, please carry on.
Yeah. So I just felt that, Ishvara himself is just like any of us, but he was just approached really close. There's still that veil. There's still one attachment remaining. Okay. And therefore the compassion wells forth. And
the veil
has no reason to have compassion.
Parabrahman is. That's it.
Is, yeah.
Right. Ishvara, the compassion or the veil that you talk about, yes, you are right. And therefore, it is called superego. Right? Just for the definition purposes, for the use of words to understand that the difference between your ego and the ego of Ishvara is that there is superego. Again, go back to the ocean and the wave. Right? The ocean also has its own ego. Right? And the waves rise from it, merge into it. Some waves start jumping around. The ocean says, hey, look, I need to rein you back. Right? Now, but the Ishvarai ego, the Ishvaric ego, is voluntary. That's the difference. I choose to project myself by my own Maya. Doesn't he say that? In the Bhagavad Gita, he says that.
In fact, that's where I had my conflict. I said, why would he even say that? Is there an error here?
So he chooses to project himself, which is why the whole concept of avataran, we talked about this when we talked about Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, is that having experienced that Brahman, and this is also in the Buddhist tradition, it is called the Bodhisattva vow. The Bodhisattva vow, the difference between Avataran and Bodhisattva is the Bodhisattva has not crossed and come back. Whereas the Avatar has crossed and chosen to come back. He chooses to come back. He holds back that particular ego. He holds that. So in the Tantric interpretation, it is said that the energy is held at the Vishuddhi Chakra, enabling the master to speak, enabling him to teach. Right? And the only thing that true masters have only done is teach. Right? All those display of powers and so on and so forth are much of lower grade in terms of attainments. They are called siddhis. Siddhis, right? Anima, Garima, Laghima, all these are
I
called
think it is
siddhis.
Ramakrishna Paramahansa who said, they are distractions. Do not.
They are distractions, right? For that matter, he removed these siddhis from 2 of his devotees. So the siddhis are actually distractions. Those who get stuck with those siddhis get stuck there. No great master. We have, in our own very recent histories, we have seen Ramana Maharshi, we have seen or heard of Swami Vivekananda, we have heard of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, right? We have, and I have experienced Gurudev. And all of these people, the only thing that they come back and do is teach, which is what Krishna is also doing. I'm not going to here to display or see the displaying of powers of Krishna in terms of the lifting of the Govardhan and all that is the Puranic story told to us to instill in us a sense of awe to approach. But once that awe has been approached and you have understood, then you go beyond. And that is why you study the Bhagavad Gita and do not study the Puranas. The Puranas are wonderful, but they are the primers, right? Then you understand the primers, you understand the stories of the primers, then you go beyond those stories of the primers, and then you say, fine, now let me understand what is there beyond. That's when you start looking at the Bhagavad Gita first, then you look at the Upanishads, and then you look at the Brahma Sutra, and so on and so forth, and you understand the Prashnatraya, and you start studying. But that compassion that you talked about, it's a voluntary way. It's a voluntary way because he chooses to put that on. So just exactly as the ocean at points of time chooses to rage, but at points of time reigns in all its powers and becomes completely pacific. That is how Ishvara is also behaving. So if you have not experienced Ishvara, and another very important thing is there are lots of things that we have not experienced or know of, doesn't mean that they don't exist. So just an answer to your son. So there are many things that, I mean, the easiest is to trap him into quantum physics. So, right, let's end for today. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Harihi Om, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.
May I add something to what Raghuji was mentioning earlier?
Yes,
about, I mean, just an extension kind of thing. You're asking about, telling about the